welcome into the Sideline Fantasy Football Show. This is your host, E. Rocco, joined by my co-host, Crimmy Charles. And we are both here today to discuss Week 11 of the fantasy football season already. Kind of crazy to believe that we're already here in Week 11. Isn't that crazy, Crimmy?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we just drafted, 2 days ago, but here we
Yeah.
are.
I mean, we got 3 weeks left. That's it. Trades are over. Trade deadline's done. 3 weeks left. And that's, it's kind of tough with a trade deadline, and maybe we can discuss it in the future. But I usually don't like having a trade deadline and then having your team for only like 1 or 2 weeks on the season. You know what I mean? I like trades being done and then you having to have whatever team you have for at least a third of a season, which is kind of where we're at. 3-4 games. So, I like it, and yeah, there's not as much, action or trade talk going on, but I think it's important that you roll with whatever team you have after the deadline for at least 3 or so weeks. And plus, a lot of it is I don't want teams trading that aren't in it, but that really wasn't the case this year. This year has been one of those weird years where every team, even now with 3 weeks left, yes, in Division Two, they're 2 games back with 3 to go, but even now, there's still nobody eliminated after this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously tough going to have to take it, a 2-game deficit into the last 3 weeks, but it all depends on who you play. Obviously, those last 2 weeks, those final 2 weeks are very crucial. This week's
Yeah,
our last week of, out of the division play, and then you kind of roll back around with 2 division,
right.
games
That's
again.
important.
So
Yeah.
that can be very big for people. Obviously, we'll break that down as we go, but this week could be big and essentially massive to change the landscape of playoffs,
Yeah,
as every week will be.
Yeah, and every single matchup except mine has had some games gone on so far. And just based on projections and stuff, it's going to be fun to kind of see how it all pans out. Peter and Tori are basically done if they lose again. That's darn near a fact. So we might actually have some eliminated teams this week, but I think both teams actually have a decent shot of winning this week. So we're going to see whether or not, that ends up being the case. So we're going to jump into these matchups. After we jump into the matchups, we might take a look at the league and kind of predict and see what we think is going to happen. So, without any trades, with no further ado, we will go to my matchup first, which is me against Tyler. Tyler doesn't feel confident. I'm projected, and again, this has been the case all year. I'm projected for the most points in the league by a pretty significant margin. This is not the first or second or even probably third time this has happened. And Tyler, believe it or not, which I don't, he doesn't think he has much of a shot. It sounded like he's projected for the third most points in the league this week or fourth most with 100 and I think 109. And he's got some decent matchups. Breeze against Tampa Bay is very well going to knock out Michael Thomas for the most part. Zeke versus Detroit is a easy matchup for him. I think it's not a guaranteed win for me. I do like a lot of my matchups. Michael Thomas against Tampa Bay, Julio Jones against Carolina, Josh Jacobs against Cincinnati, but it's not guaranteed. But what's your take looking at this one?
Um, yeah, it's pretty balanced on both sides. Obviously, I don't necessarily see anything that's going to give either team a super duper advantage. The matchup wise, like you said, is pretty solid. The way the schedules break down, you have guys at 4 o'clock. He has a guy at 4 o'clock, so you kind of know where you stand after those 4 o'clock games because he has Robinson and you have that Bears defense to kind of close things out. Obviously, I give the advantage to Robinson because I feel like those Rams will probably score points some way or somehow. Like obviously, I hope they do at least because that team's been very hit or miss all year. But yeah, I don't really see any like I guess favorable matchup to the point where I'm giving a team a win here. Obviously, projections say you're going to win, but those obviously are based off of metrics that we don't necessarily carry, and I just really don't see a glaring weakness for either team right now.
Yeah, and Tyler needs a win to stay alive at this point. He started off kind of shaky, then got to 4-3, and he's now lost 3 in a row. So he's kind of hanging on by a thread here. Really needs to pull out a victory. I want to win just to feel safe because if I lose and a few other teams in my division win, then I might get a little nervous. So if I win this week, I'll be feeling pretty safe. Yeah, yeah, I'll be feeling pretty safe overall. I do like my matchups. Like you said, we don't know how they do the whole prediction algorithm, but I do like a lot of my matchups this week, and I think I'll do all right. Even like a Tevin Coleman against an Arizona, I'm expecting decent things from. Le'Veon Bell against the Redskins defense, I'm expecting decent things from, despite him being a little banged up. But we'll see. Next game up. This one's already kind of gotten underway a little bit. Chop Squad, your brother versus Chad. Your brother, after starting off 2-0, went to 2-6. He's won two in a row, again hanging by a thread here, going against one of the best teams in the league, Chad, who has had a team go so far. Odell Beckham has 8 points. Your brother has had Landry grow with 12. So through that first game, you got to give a little bit of an edge to Trey because Landry put up more points than ODB, but Chad is still projected to beat him by 14 to this point. Does your brother stand much of a chance? The good thing is he's got a lot of Monday and Sunday nights.
Yeah,
Or, sorry, Monday nights.
I'd say he does still stand a chance. Just looking at, kind of counteracting players. Deshaun Watson is in a very tough matchup with Baltimore, and obviously Chad has Hopkins. So I can see Deshaun, if that defense kind of bottles him up down the field. Duke Johnson can be in play for sure for Trey. So obviously that kind of gives him, some sort of cancellation out of Deshaun at least because the targets could be going to Duke, in little checkdowns or whatever the case may be. So I feel like that there kind of gives him, a good indication of like obviously how his team will be because his running backs are obviously they've been with no Carson, it's tough. So obviously he's kind of dealing with that right now. But just looking down the board for Chad, like you have Dalvin Cook against Denver. Yeah, Denver isn't a great team overall wise, but like that defense isn't bad. That defense isn't going to kind of just give up a bunch of yardage. So that could obviously give Trey an upper hand because if you can bottle up Dalvin, then Chad's team kind of has to rely on other things where like Watson can also be bottled up. We don't know how Hill will be in Atlanta. Obviously, last week we saw him do okay once Devontae Freeman was knocked out of the
20
game. But
carries.
yeah, but like if they're gonna, obviously Carolina's rush defense isn't very good. We saw that last week against the Pack, so he could give Chad a good game and kind of give him, I'm sure Chad isn't expecting much from somebody like that, but he could obviously sneak into that top, 15, top 10 points scored for somebody, against his defense. It's not a, there's not a non-zero chance he will do it because there's obviously a chance anybody can, but just down the list, as those guys are matchup wise for Chad is tough. Like Kansas City and Eckler are probably his best on paper looking matchup because Ertz against New England obviously isn't going to be anything spectacular. The Raiders defense could obviously boost up his points, but so can the Jets defense on Trey's side of things. So I kind of feel like this matchup is more so like yours and Tyler's, where I don't really see a weakness outside of and running back on Trey's team, but that could really work in his favor game script wise. So it's tough. Obviously, Chad being off to an 8 point start with Beckham, you wanted more. You could have had more of that touchdown stud, but obviously got taken back and kind of worked in favor for Trey later on in the day. So I don't really see like a guaranteed winner here, and neither does the projections. I mean, they do. I again don't know why they would project people so poorly on Trey's side of things, just because I feel like his team isn't awful. But again, I don't know the algorithm, so the projections say Chad's gonna beat his ass. Where I say Chad's gonna beat his ass, I have no idea. I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed win for either team, though.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think Chad does have a little bit of an advantage. I think it's going to come down to running backs, though. Obviously, Dalvin Cook is awesome, and he really has to be limited. I think if Trey has a chance, he needs to be held under 18, even in the 15 range, because who knows what Hill's going to do. And then Duke Johnson on the other end, he's kind of got to break free for at least a touchdown or get 9, 10, 11. And then Trey really needs Gurley to step in, but again, he's going against the Bears defense, which has a pretty good run defense. I mean, it's crazy to think Todd Gurley this year has been over 60 yards 3 times. He has yet to have a 100-yard rushing game. He's actually been held under 50 yards 4 times. When you see the name Gurley and you're thinking, all right, good, but really he's just, I mean, what they said in the beginning of the season has stuck true. Like, he's not the same running back. I don't know what it is or what about it, but running back 24 at this point, he's maybe a starting running back in fantasy. It's kind of crazy. So I think Todd Gurley needs to have a big game, but going against that Chicago defense, I don't see it happening. So now you got to rely on Kansas City. And does Kansas City put up 35-40 against the Chargers, which at that point, Trey is going to need that to happen to start piling up fantasy points. So I do think Chad is the favorite here, but maybe Baltimore defense could hold Watson in check, which would hold Hopkins in check. Maybe Eckler's role diminishes a little bit. This one will be fun. I mean, it's going to be. I'm curious to see how this one pans out for sure. Chad doesn't need a win. Your brother does. So it'll get even more interesting if he is able to pull off a third in a row. But let's jump into the next matchup here, which is going to be Dave against Peter. Peter desperately needs a win. He was kind of able to hang on just barely when he was 3-5, loser of 2 in a row, really just hanging on by his last string here, while Dave is 4-6 in that very, very jumbled up Division 1. Looking at this, again, if you really look at the projections in a PPR league, most teams should be projected for over 100 or not. If you look at a lot of projections this week, not many teams are projected over 100 at all. And this is another matchup that shows that. Peter had one player go, which is McDonald for 5. No, that's not great, but at the same time, like, tight ends are such a wash this year that's actually McDonald's like probably 4th best game of the year. So not a great start, not a horrible start. What do you look at in this matchup?
Essentially, I'm looking at quarterbacks for both these teams off jump. Rivers has been kind of just ass backwards this year. I mean, he hasn't been great. The last 3 games, this dude has failed to record over 15 fantasy points. He's failed to record over 12 fantasy points as well. Like, that's putting capping at 15 is kind of being generous there. But Rivers has not played well. Obviously, you're playing Kansas City, so it's kind of,
and this is Rivers on Peter's team. How crazy is that?
Rivers on Peter's team. Like,
yeah.
They've let Rivers go for this, just because Rivers has been so, just kind of ass backwards. But to me, Peter, obviously you're playing Pittsburgh, and Baker wasn't playing very well. So I swear I saw in the chat a couple, maybe even last week, that Peter dropped Baker, but I wasn't sure if he picked Baker back up just because he saw him sitting there. I don't know, but that trade clearly for Baker didn't really work out in his favor as he's not using him. But yeah, QBs obviously are a big thing here. Rivers kind of cancels out Keenan for Dave. Rivers kind of cancels out any sort of passing touchdown to Melvin, if that even happens. And if Dave were to have Eckler, same thing, cancels that out. So having Rivers can kind of kill one of Dave's receivers, which is pretty solid when it's his best guy. And Dave kind of hones that entire, attack, even passing and rushing on the Chargers. So any success Rivers has will kind of correlate with Dave's team. And any success that team doesn't have will kind of screw over both teams, but less so Peter. So he's kind of, playing the pros and cons here. Playing Rivers here is probably smart just because it kind of gives you a play on Dave's team. If it succeeds, you're kind of getting a piece of that. If it doesn't, then obviously you're only losing 1 piece where Dave's losing 2.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too because, Baker Mayfield, who Peter's kind of had a hate relationship with all year after his early season trade, put up 21. It's like, I don't start him, and now Baker puts up 21. And if he would have started Baker, he'd be looking okay. Because Rivers could put up 21 against that Kansas City defense. I'm not saying he won't, but is he going to put up 30? Probably not. So maybe Baker would have been the better play at this point, but with how bad he's been, I probably would have played Phillip Rivers as well. But yeah, looking at this matchup, I think the projections for the most part are right. I do think Dave wins this one. I think Jameis Winston, Tampa Bay could get down, and they're just going to throw a lot. But that New Orleans defense is pretty good, so I'm not expecting a ton of points from Jameis, but probably 40-plus throws or close to it. Melvin Gordon has started to pick up the pace a little bit lately with his play. Like the last couple of weeks, he's had 19 and 25, so you can't go wrong there. So he's starting to kind of get his role a little bit larger. Lindsey, I've always liked a lot. Kind of been struggling a little bit as of late, 28 points in the last 3 weeks, but he'll get going again. Shark, Hawkinson, Sanu. Not a great solid squad, but I just like it better than um, Peters at this point. Does David Montgomery get many carries again? Or is his role going to be gone? Alvin Kamara will probably do all right. Sanders will probably do all right. I even like Gallup a lot, but I just don't know if Peter's got enough. I just don't know if he has enough firepower. You look at the team and you go, you got one star in Kamara, who honestly, or Kamara, who was not really good at all last week, and he was on the verge of like a 2-point game until the last few minutes. I don't know. I think that Dave will probably win this one and stay in the thick of things in the playoff hunt, and that'll just make that division all the more interesting. But Peter needs a win here. A loss, I don't know if it mathematically puts him out, but for lack of a better word, I think he's out. So he needs a win. Next game up is going to be you versus Rob, and you are projected, I think, for the second or third most points in the league this week with 110. Rob is projected for 85, and he's already had not one, not two, but three players go already in Kareem Hunt, James Conner, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, not much else to say on this matchup other than unless your team puts up a dud or unless someone on his team drops a 40 piece, you're looking really good right now. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I watched the Thursday night game and saw Juju get knocked out and James Conner get knocked out of the game, it's tough to obviously salvage that because you have Kareem Hunt who's still splitting carries with Chubb. He's not a kind of a workhorse guy right now where he can kind of give you, those 20 carries you need to kind of get production out of him. Obviously, we saw him on the field quite a bit, more so as a pass catcher than a runner. But when you're getting 14 points out of three guys, that's pretty tough to kind of battle back with, especially when both your running backs and your flex position are gone. It wasn't like he played a kicker and a running back or a kicker and a receiver and got 14. He played two running backs and a flex position, which are three crucial points of your team, and got
Right.
14. So I don't really see anybody, like obviously I'll be watching it throughout the day, but I don't really see anybody on his team that kind of threatens me in a sense where I can lose this game just because unless Mike Evans kind of produces like he did a couple weeks ago, where he has three
And Lattimore
touchdowns,
should
like
be on him.
180 yards. I think Lattimore might actually be out of the game. I'm not too sure. I saw that
Oh,
the other
yeah.
day. So even if that's the case, though, like I don't really think that Saints defense isn't going to get to Jameis. And like as long as you can get to Jameis and kind of slow that passing attack down, that's fine. Like even if Evans were to go off for 40, I don't really see anybody like a Jared Cook or a Niners defense or something like that to kind of bulk up that score and give him another 20 piece that he kind of needs to go, along with that. So again, obviously I'll watch the games. I'm going to watch my scores, hoping that I win, but I do feel comfortable as of this point.
Yeah, no reason not to. Obviously, you got a pretty solid roster heading into today. Josh Allen against Miami, Fournette against a pretty solid Indeed defense. Doesn't matter who Christian McCaffrey goes against; he could be going against anybody, and he will be doing a good job. Thank God this is not FanDuel, or else you'd be paying a hefty price. You get Christian McCaffrey basically for free. Jamison Crowder, I look at that and sometimes I go, ugh, not a good play, but really, the last 2 weeks he has been. 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks, 80 plus yards, and honestly his next few matchups look pretty decent as well. Actually, the rest of his season, he plays Washington, Oakland, Cincinnati, Miami, and Baltimore. So he's got pretty good matchups moving forward as well. Cup against Chicago, we'll see. I don't know what in the world happened to Cooper Cup last week, and you hope to not see that again. I mean, how does a man have 220 yards and a touchdown, and then in his next game not even get a single catch? And you were freaking out about that last week too.
Yeah, that was bad.
That was bad. Doyle, your tight end position's kind of been weak. You're hoping even what he's done the last 2 weeks, you'd be cool with that at this point. And Damian Williams. Damian Williams is always kind of a question mark. Who's really going to take over that role in Kansas City? You hope the last couple weeks of his performance is kind of an indication of that. I think you got a good shot here. I don't even think Dak Prescott against Detroit's going to do a ton either. I mean, Dak Prescott's numbers against teams not named the New York Giants have actually been very below average. So I don't think anyone on Rob's team can really push him over the edge at this point. So I think you're the favorite. Next matchup. This is going to be a and I forgot to say I will say your matchup I think is the most important in terms of playoffs this week because you're 4-6. You're basically tied for the third playoff spot in ours. Rob's 5-5 and has the third playoff spot in the other division by a game on everybody else or two games in some cases. And if he loses this week, that division gets jumbled up pretty good. So you winning and him losing is really gonna shake things up in the league, and that's looking like that's going to be the case. But moving forward, Dana and Tori. This one is going to be fun. Why? Because Dana at 10-0 with a chance of a perfect season is going to ride the ship and decide not to start a tight end. Um, he wanted to let me know. Well, he already let me know. He wanted me to let you guys know again, even though it was already said in the chat, that he would have won every single week this week or this year without having started a tight end. We've done the math. We've looked at it. Okay. He's going to roll the dice and not start a tight end this week with a perfect season on the line. He's got 87 points projected. Tori, with all of her bye weeks, Rodgers on a bye, Devontae Adams on a bye, Packers defense on a bye, her kicker was on a bye, Devontae Freeman's out, is projected for 98, and at this point is projected for the win. One of Dana's biggest workhorses, Nick Chubb, had a good game on the ground, didn't get in the end zone, so he's only got 9.2. Does Tori have a shot to win this week?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, we saw if you look at her roster, we saw Kenyon Drake do what he did against San Fran. I feel like he'll be involved for sure, just because that team doesn't really have much choice outside of David Johnson. At this point in the year, you might as well just sit the man until he's healthy again. There's no point in risking further injury just to kind of prove himself. Like we know what he's capable of. We know what kind of player he is. Like you know what you get out of him. So you might as well just kind of let the guy who you're either going to re-sign or maybe not re-sign. He's on a contract year, so you're able to then run him into the ground if you would like to do so, which kind of keeps David Johnson off of the field at that point. But matchup-wise, she's got good ones. I mean, Garoppolo against Arizona, obviously Garoppolo's been pretty solid. Drake I spoke about. Michelle against Philly. Not a bad matchup by any means. Obviously, Michelle has been hit or miss, but that Philly defense is also hit or miss, so she can get a decent game out of him for sure. Samuel and Ridley in the same game. Both those secondaries haven't been playing fantastic. I'd obviously give the edge to Carolina if they do get Bradbury back this week, which I'm pretty sure he is in. So that kind of hinders Ridley a little bit, but he'll get massive amounts of targets just because that team, I don't know if they can rely on Hill. We spoke about that in Chad's game, so that's kind of a hit or miss thing there too. But Kelsey on Monday, Brown playing Miami today. She's got solid matchups, and Dana, same thing. I mean, he's got guys who can play. You've got Mark Ingram against Houston, who's pretty solid. You've got Cooper against Detroit, who again is good in a good spot there. But right in the middle there was Sutton, Hooper, and Boyd. Boyd last week with Fisker or whatever, Finley under center, wasn't necessarily fantastic. I mean, he gave you 9.2. Not awful, but if you get that from, I guess, your flex / tight end position, are you going to be happy with that? Because you have to take one of these players' points and kind of cut it in half to make up for the lack of tight end. So having a spot that can give you 7-8 points and not filling it because you don't want to drop any money on your bench could come back and cost you. And I feel like Tori's in a spot where that definitely could cost Dane.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to roll the dice here. Dana has said he does not want to drop anyone on his bench. I don't necessarily blame him. He is rocking two defenses, though, and he has said obviously he does not want to drop the Patriots defense. Why he's not just starting the Patriots defense, I'm not sure. He told me he really believes that Rams defense is going to put up points against Chicago. All right, well. He's basically saying I want to start the Rams defense because they're going to put up enough points to the point where I don't need a tight end, even though I have one of the best historically, statistical defenses in NFL history. I mean, pull up the Patriots defense page real quick. I know everyone knows the Patriots have been great this year, but when you really pull up that page and see just how many points they've actually gotten week to week, it is absolutely insane. I mean, 10, 37, 14, 23, 14, 25, 25, 21. Dana said the other day the Patriots are like having another flex. Not even. The Patriots are like having another really good quarterback
Yeah.
as your defense. I mean, it is insane what the Patriots have done this year, and he doesn't want to start him because he thinks the Rams are going to do better, which, I mean, that could work out, but you're also not starting a tight end. So Tori right now is projected to win. I think she's got decent matchups with Garoppolo against Arizona. Kenyon Drake, I think, should get okay touches again. Maybe needs to get in the end zone for her. Sony Michelle, I think that Philadelphia New England game could be kind of a grinded out game where Michelle could get in the end zone a couple times. Kelsey's going to be all right. John Brown has been really honestly, if John Brown's been a pretty darn good receiver this year. If you look at his numbers as well, he'll probably have over 1,000 yards this year. I think Tori's got a chance to get the O away from Dana, despite having everyone on a bye this week. And no, she's not in the playoff race in particular. She's 2 games back, but with a Rob loss, I looked at the schedule. If Rob loses, which he's on pace to, and Tori wins, which she's on pace to, she's a game behind Rob, and she plays him next week. So then it can get really interesting. But right now, does the O go? We'll find out. If I'm Dana, I don't know. You hardly ever see people run the table in fantasy. If I'm Dana, I'm trying to go 13-0. This is a really, really risky proposition that could pay off, and we'll see if it does. Moving on to the next matchup, we have Jay versus Kyle. Another big one here. Kyle's actually lost 2 in a row after starting 6-2, so he's 6-4. Jay is 4-6, again tied with everybody in Division One with the third playoff spot at this point. Jay's projected to lose by 6, and have you again look at these projections? No one's really projected to do a whole lot. Jay 86, Kyle 92. Jay already had his kicker and his defense go though, which only got him 2 points. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Kyle is yet again employing the I am not going to put a kicker in unless I need to strategy. And yeah, I mean, looking at this matchup right now, no team's projected for much. Just looking at it, who's got the better chance?
Kyle. I can simply say Kyle just because Jay played 2 players on Thursday. He played a defense and he played a kicker. They gave him 1. You get 2 points out of 2 positions. I don't care where they are. That's pretty tough to kind of combat when your opponent has, Derek Carr against Cincinnati. James White is always involved in that Patriots offense attack against Philly. Joe Mixon, who's coming off probably his best week of the year against Oakland, and you got Goodwin, who's been solid. Pascal, who's been getting a bulk of the targets in Indianapolis with no Ty. Waller, who's been solid, and then Sanders is the question mark there. But I mean, on Jay's side of things, like what do you see that's appealing? Like I don't really see anything appealing. Kyle Allen against Atlanta is probably the most appealing thing I see on his team outside of anybody playing Miami. So Singletary, which is a given. Like obviously, if you're playing the Dolphins, that's a very sexy spot to be in. But Hyde against Baltimore, Parker against Buffalo, Diggs against Denver, Henry against Kansas City, I guess would be more appealing, but I still would trust more so your quarterback to kind of give you more points in the tight end. And then Stills against Baltimore. Like you don't have great matchups there. I don't see a lot that I like on that side of the fence.
Yeah, again, yeah. I mean, Kyle, again, he doesn't need a win here because of the way the division is on the other side, but kind of in the same case as me, could use a win just to feel a little bit safer in terms of that. But overall, Jay also needs a win, somehow staying alive in that division. I think this one, again, is going to be pretty close. Does Devin Singletary up his touch count? That's going to be important. Does Kyle Allen do well against Atlanta? Kyle Allen's projected for 17. We will see. Receiver-wise, Diggs and Parker, I know Parker had a big game last week, but Diggs has kind of, again, the last 2 weeks gone down again in terms of point totals. Hunter Henry's been pretty good. And then Kenny Stills is kind of a hit-or-miss guy as well. I do like Kyle overall. I think Miles Sanders is going to get a decent amount of touches. Waller, Pascal was good. Godwin, again, that New Orleans defense is good. I think Evans or Godwin do well. I just don't see both of them going off. I actually think Mixon against Oakland's not a bad matchup either. So I do think Kyle does pull out and win this one, especially with his projections being a little bit lower than they should be because he doesn't have a kicker in. Once he throws a kicker in there, he's probably projected for at least 6, 7 more. So I think Kyle should win this one. As you mentioned, Jay's defense and kicker have gone already, so that's also the case there. But we'll see. We'll see. So that does our matchups for week 11. And before we wrap up here, taking a look at the league picture in our division, Dana's already in. I'm darn near close to it. And you got Dave, Trey, Krim, and Jay all at 4 and 6. Based on what you know, obviously you're in that group, but who's got the best chance of that group to move forward, not named yourself?
Not name myself. Myself, obviously, I feel is good, in good spot, but not name myself. That's kind of tough. I want to
Because I mean,
say,
I'll say it. I think you got the best chance, so you don't even have to say it yourself. I think you do,
yeah,
but outside of you, who does?
I want to say Trey, just because his bye weeks are over. He has Tyreek Hill to run the rest of the year. He's got Mahomes to run the rest of the year. He'll get Carson back next week. Dave kind of hits a shitty spot in his season where he's going to be without a starting running back and a starting receiver. I think next week when you guys
Yep.
play.
Yep.
So even whatever happens this week, if Dave and I were to both win and we remain tied, he has to now look at his squad and say, who can I sit here and play in place of Keenan Allen and in place of Melvin Gordon and in place of, could have been Rivers. Obviously, he's adapted to that, but just looking on his bench right now, I mean, who can you just kind of slide in for Melvin? You have Ronald Jones, who's very hit or miss at running back. Tariq Cohen or Jay Ajayi. I mean, Jay Ajayi joins a backfield where, yes, he might get some run this week just because Jordan Howard may not play, but Jordan Howard would be back next week, I'd assume. And now you have Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard there to take the bulk of the carries, and Jay Ajayi gets pushed to the back. He's more so there just because Sproles was on IR this week. So you don't really want to run him out there. You have Tariq and Jones. That's kind of your own two options. Tariq hasn't been fantastic, obviously. Ronald Jones, again, very hit or miss. He could go off for, 15 like he did or 18 he did last week, or kind of do nothing. It's just a matter of the game script there for him. So you're taking a big hit there. And receiver-wise, too, I mean, you have Marvin Jones, yeah. You have Sanu in your flex, which you would need to move him up and then still play either Marvin Jones or Terrell Williams in that spot. So, again, like Dave's team isn't really equipped to kind of handle those two buys coming at the same time, just because, again, like we've said, he's sat and tried to play with one team the whole year. So that's tough. I do think that Trey has a better shot at it than Dave. I'm kind of ruling Jay out just because his team has been very bad, and I feel like he caught a couple breaks, up to this point to even be in the playoff conversation. So I'm assuming it's two-headed kind of a two-horse race there between Trey and Dave, and fighting those buys is going to be tough for Dave next week, especially against your team, which isn't really a bad team at all.
Yeah, I mean that. Like I said, I do think you have the best chance just based on what the situation is at this point. I think you got to win this week. Next week you play Trey himself, who has the Chiefs on a bye. So not only are you favored to win this week with Rob in tow, you have Trey next week with the Chiefs on a bye. So I think you're going to get to 6-6 at the least. But then you play me, and I'm not saying that's not a guaranteed win or a guaranteed loss by any means. That's going to be a darn good matchup. But I think you should win these next 2 weeks to at least get to 6-6. And I don't know if I can say the same for the other two teams. If another team is 6-6 at that point, that'll make it really, really curious as to what happens. But at this point, I think you should be locked in for the next 2 weeks. But it's fantasy football, and you just never know.
Yeah.
On the other side, off your predictions, I already told you, Tori is projected to beat the 10-0 Dana this week. And then she does play Rob next week, who's, again, projected to lose. But Rob's got a game lead on Tyler, a 2-game lead on everyone else, and his team has been on fire as of late up until this week, obviously. Would you bet that Rob loses his spot, or does he hold on these last few weeks?
it's going to end up coming out of Torrey, right? Like, I don't really think Tyler's team, especially after this week, will be in a position to kind of challenge for that. So Torrey's team, when healthy, when everyone's kind of playing, is obviously solid. But if I had to put money on it, I would kind of just say things stay as they are, and Rob kind of still just stays in that third playoff team there.
I probably would too at this point. And again, the other crazy thing is the guy that's a game back of Rob is Tyler, and they play each other the last week of the year. So Rob's road to the playoffs is not going to be easy. He plays you this week, then Tori, and then Tyler. And if he loses, 2 out of those 3 or anything like that, then it could get real dicey. And obviously, at this point, Tyler is not, for this week projected to win. Obviously, I am, but it's not guaranteed. Like we said, he's projected for 110. If he's somehow able to pull out a win this week, him and Rob are now tied, and he plays him the last week of the year. And if Tori somehow beats Rob, then all of a sudden Rob not only drops out of the playoff race, he's going to be behind Tori and Tyler. I mean, that's really how much stuff can shake up in these next 2 weeks if certain things play a certain way. So I would agree, just based on his lead right now and his team, that things do hold par to this point. But it is fantasy, and that's why we play the game. You play to win the game. So we'll see what happens. But with that being said, as of right now, if the season ended today, it'd be me, Dana, and I think Dave in the playoffs. I honestly don't know. I'm not even going to go there. And then Chad, Kyle, and Rob, and the other one at this point. But we still got 3 weeks left. We're down to the last few weeks here in the fantasy football regular season, and we will see what happens. Any
Yeah,
last thoughts here before we wrap up?
yeah. I just want to throw in that obviously dealing with this many tiebreakers with myself, Jay, Trey, Dave. Even the site doesn't know what the hell it's talking about because it shows Dave in the playoffs on the standings of things, but when you go to playoffs, it shows Trey, which
Well, if you look at the standings, it actually has Trey as the 6th ranked team, which would mean he's in the playoffs. But Dave's listed third in the division.
yeah,
That's
which
what's
is
weird.
very odd. So I do think that it would that makes sense to me that it would be Trey
Right now, yeah.
just because Jay the big thing there is that the person who beat Dave in the thick of things was Jay. And Jay lost to both Trey and myself. I've obviously lost to Trey, but I get a shot to kind of combat that next week. Obviously, if I win and I have more points than him at that point, I'm kind of just sitting there waiting for the season to end to kind of see if Dave can tie me or whatever the case is, because Dave will have the tiebreaker because we do not play again. So this is going to be kind of tough. Obviously, I have obviously points wise a jump on Trey and Dave, so I can't really complain there. But things are going to get crazy in the next 24 hours for sure, and then going into next week as well.
Yeah, that's why that whole situation needs to kind of undo itself because it's a little dicey. So we'll have to see what happens with all that. It's going to be a fun last few weeks of the year. Crazy thing, we're already down to our last 3 weeks of the fantasy football season, but a lot of fun matchups. No one's out of it yet, and it'll be a fun ending. So we'll see what happens. With that being said, I think that wraps us up here on the Sideline Fantasy radio show. And good luck to all your teams except Tyler. And yeah, have a good and Dana. I don't want Dana to go 13-0. So we'll see you and because he's being cocky about not starting a tight end. So go everyone's team except Tyler and Dana's. And yeah, have a good weekend. See you guys next week.
That was really funny when you jumped and you're like, shit,